Hello, welcome to Making Concessions. I'm Griffin Presnell.
And I'm Mark Albers.
We're just a couple of nerds who have seen a movie and we just want to talk to you about it, whether you would like it or not. So get that popcorn buttered and set that phone on silent because we're about to start Making Concessions. Today we're going to be talking about the 1988 horror anime classic Akira, written and directed by Katsuhiro Otomo. What I really love about this movie, Mark, is the just amazing story that it has. The stories can be complicated on the first viewing, but when you really look at it, it's the tale of these two brothers, Kaneda and Tetsuo, who aren't brothers by birth, but have sort of formed that bond through growing up together. Kaneda is essentially the older brother who is the leader of their biker gang, who has this really cool red bike and red jacket, all-around cool guy. And Tetsuo is the sort of younger brother who is inferior. We see him in the beginning, and he's not that good at, driving a motorcycle. He's not good like Kaneda. He's feels inferior to all of the group. But when a motorcycle crash causes Tetsuo to get these incredible latent psychic abilities that have been hidden within him this whole time, he starts getting experimented on by the government, but he escapes, and he starts going on this huge psychic rampage through Neo Tokyo, taking place in the distant, far-off future of 2019. But he starts to discover, that he has this huge ego, and that there's this megalomaniac behind everything, and it's up to Kaneda to try and stop him.
And even, definitely, this man has huge psychic abilities. I mean, he can explode people with his mind, lift tanks like they're nothing, throw them across the road. And I just love the main character, Kaneda. He just tries, even when Tetsuo is being experimented on by the government, he tries to go save his little brother figure. And when he discovers that Tetsuo is now kind of a psychopath.
Yeah, just kind of crazy.
He figures his new role in life is to kill Tetsuo or stop him at the very least.
Yeah, because, he's kind of responsible for creating this, through the way Tetsuo has been treated. He's, like I described to you, he's sort of the little brother who, when you were playing video games, his controller wasn't plugged in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, now he's the one who's always winning at Super Smash Bros.
Very much so.
And so he's taking this huge leap ahead of everyone, evolutionarily, sort of, if that's a word. We're movie critics, we're not linguists. But Tetsuo, he just sort of goes bonkers. And you've got this incredible story about everyone trying to stop him. You've got the government. You've got these psychic children who have been experimented on for the past 50 years, who were around when the titular character, Akira, lost control of his abilities and caused this massive explosion in what would have been 1986
and this,
in the film story.
And this all takes place after World War III, right? Because, something happens in the new Tokyo where Tokyo gets destroyed, and we later find out that it's Akira that blows up most of the city.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, they don't really look about how Akira had this huge influence on the culture of the story in Neo Tokyo. There are these cults. There are all these people who are worshiping Akira, who saw him as this progenitor god who was bringing people to the afterlife. And they think that Akira will once again return and will bring everyone else in a sort of rapture-esque thing. And then you have the government who is experimenting on Akira, trying to prevent something like this happening again. And you really see that a lot of this was really influenced by the attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and these nuclear war and how that sort of changed human history. A lot of writers, a lot of directors, Katsuhiro Otomo, David Lynch, for example, they are all very, very interested in how the atomic bomb sort of hurt our society.
Very much so.
How it evolved us into beings who could end a war just like that.
It was also really cool because you could see the influence of Western culture on there. You could definitely see calls to corrupt politicians, the need for money, over absolutely everything else. I mean, there's a scene in the movie where this politician, a corrupt politician, is trying to run away from his problems, and he's just stuffing a case full of cash because that's what was important to him, not even his own life.
Yeah. And I do think that, there's all of these amazing subplots in this story. You've got these politicians, you've got these rebels, you've got these religious zealots. And I do think that one big issue with this film is that it is sort of a case of too many cooks.
Very much so, yeah.
There are quite a few different storylines that are going on, and it can kind of make the story a little muddled on your first viewing. And I do think that that is mostly part of because this is a 2,000-page graphic novel series compressed down to 2 hours. So I do think that everything in there has to be in there to make this a story that makes sense, a story that has a meaning. But it's not going to be something that I really got on the first viewing. It took me 2 or 3 more viewings to understand it.
So did you read the graphic novel at all?
I've read a few of the volumes. I've read 1 and I've read 2. I'm always, whenever I go to like a Barnes and Noble or places like that or bookstores, I'm always on the look for volume number 3.
Cool. So how does the movie stack up with the story?
Well, I would just call it really an abridgment.
Really?
Because since Otomo really did get this, since Katsuhiro Otomo, the writer of the comic, make this movie, he had this huge hand in developing it. It really is one of those cases where the author really did get his vision in the book-to-movie adaptation.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's one of those really rare instances. Yeah, because you can compare this to something like those Percy Jackson movies.
Jesus, we're not going to talk about those.
We're not going to talk about those.
We all know what went wrong with those.
Yeah, because they just didn't know what made those magic.
They did not.
So through getting Otomo, he really took what made Akira magic, and he put it on the silver screen. I really love the plot. I wrote a thesis on this movie, and a lot of it was about, at the end of the day, Tetsuo is this scared kid who just really doesn't know what he's doing. He's given these godlike abilities, and in the end, he's just scared. He doesn't really know how to use them all that well. He tries using them, and they just sometimes just fail on him because he doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah, and I mean there are scenes in the movie where he is on his massive power trip, and he's surprised by his own mortality. Even when he's on the bridge with all his religious zealot people who are mistaking him for Akira, he gets shot by one of the laser guns, and he's taken aback. He's surprised that he still is able to feel that pain, to get hurt. And I don't know. I just think just the conflict within Tetsuo that entire time is just, I don't know. It makes it just feel that much more real.
Yeah, it does feel like a very human story put into this amazing sci-fi element. One thing that I've always found very weird about it is its predictions. Like I said, it takes place in the distant future of 2019. But, they predicted that in 2020, Tokyo would be hosting the Olympics, which is very weird and would have been accurate. Would have. But I really love how this movie, it doesn't really focus on, the citizens. It's all about these revolutionaries and how the citizens, they'll band behind them. They'll band behind these religious people. When Tetsuo first comes, everyone's screaming that he is the second coming of Akira, coming to bring everyone else in Tokyo to the afterlife, And I don't think all those people who are on that bridge would have believed in Akira this whole time, but when they saw him, sort of changed their mind.
It's just kind of interesting because at the beginning of the movie, you see the government and like the military police, and you feel like they're going to be the bad guys. They're the ones that's going to end, but it really ends up being, somebody completely different. Yeah.
This isn't really a clear-cut good guys and bad guys. And, I think what also really makes this story really amazing is the art. And we're going to be talking more about the art when we come back from this break. So stay tuned.
I chose Wayne State because of how I felt the first day that I came here. I actually was not going to come here. I had my heart set on somewhere else. I told myself I'd come on a tour and then I'd check it out. But then I came here and I loved it. Wayne State was definitely the most affordable on my list. Their science program was the best out of the 3 that I was looking at, and the cost just was an extra bonus for that. My favorite thing about Wayne State College is the relationships that I could build with my professors from day one. I came in the classroom and they actually cared, They started to learn your name the first day. They would always call on you, ask you questions to make sure that everyone would understand it. You actually go in the lab, you get to work with, say, different skeletal models or different muscle models. Say in my anatomy lab, you could look at all the figures and the models and actually learn things from them, not just on paper. You got to look at them, you got to touch them, feel them, move them around. That was one of my favorite things. That's really important to me. Going on to the medical field, I'm gonna be in school for 4 more years after this, so building those relationships now, knowing that I can always ask someone, will always help in the future.
And we're back. We're making concessions. I'm Griffin Presnow.
I'm Mark Albers.
And we're still talking about the 1988 Katsuhiro Otomo film, Akira.
So fun.
Right now, we've already discussed the plot, but what I want to talk about is the art. Oh, the art is beautiful of this movie.
So good.
If I could buy animation cells of any one thing, it would be this.
And that's because it is a full 24 frames a second, but all hand-drawn, isn't it?
Yes, yes. You had a lot of typical anime or animated shows today are either made online with Flash using computers, which is still perfectly legitimate form of animation, but a lot of what they do are things called like 2s or 5s. 2s are essentially having 1 frame drawn for every like 2, for what would be 2 frames, so you're going to be having 12 frames a second, and it can run a little bit jagged. A good example of this is in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. You'll notice that Miles Morales is a little choppy at the start. That's because he's running at 12 frames per second while everyone's running at 24.
Okay.
So that's a visual, representation for you watching to get it. But what makes Akira so amazing is that they hand drew every single frame, 24 frames every single second. So every time you would blink, 24 hand-drawn photos would be going by.
That's pretty awesome.
Another thing that really helped this with the animation is that it was voiced before it was animated. So the Japanese voice cast, they recorded their lines. And this is something that is very uncommon in the industry because with animation, a lot of the time you're going to get those 3 mouth movements, the me, the ma, and the mo. That's them for you, and the closed mouth. But with Akira, they had them record the lines so that they could actually have the characters articulating every single word that they were actually saying.
And this doesn't become super apparent in the English rendition of it.
Yes, this is something that is sort of missed out on in the English when it was dubbed over to be in English.
But that's still pretty incredible.
Yeah.
I loved watching it. Dude, the artwork was just incredible. I mean, whenever there was fire or explosions, which there are a lot of because it's a very violent movie sometimes.
Yes.
but when there are explosions and fire, oh man, it's gorgeous. And then the background of the city, they're riding on their motorcycles across bridges, and the background of the city, you could just it's just gorgeous.
Yeah, they had to try and make like new colors for their animating tools.
Wow, that's
just
cool.
for this. There were thousands of different colors used in drawing these like heavily detailed backgrounds. I think something that else is very interesting in the animation of it and the making of it, honestly, is that it was made by all of these big studios.
Oh, that's right.
They all banded together to make it. Now, this is something that is sort of lost out on today because this isn't something really talked about. But you had Toho. You had like all of the biggest studios in Japan teaming up to make this because people loved Akira as a comic.
Oh,
It was one of the biggest like non Shonen Jump magazine comics. Shonen Jump is of course one of the biggest magazines in Japan for comics, and everyone loved Akira. So they made this as like a form of success, and it paid off. It did really great in Japan. It did even better here in America.
And like you said before, this was kind of the bridge between America and Japan, almost culturally, when talking about television.
Oh yeah, and I'll get to that in a minute.
Oh yeah.
But let's keep talking about this animation. There's a lot of really great stuff in this. Something that you don't really see a lot in animation a lot these days. There's a scene where Tetsuo is staring at one of the kids, and they artificially made a tracking shot, made it so that it could like zoom in on him, and it feels like there is a camera there tracking in on him, even though it's just drawings. It's amazing. You see like all of these subtle movements, the way the hair flies, the way smoke spreads, There's a scene where a guy gets gunned down by the police.
Oh, yeah.
And it looks a little too real for comfort.
Oh man, no, that's a good. Yeah, that's something else I really noticed besides the fire was the smoke when they threw their tear gas and at the rioting crowds, just how the smoke would dissipate and the particles would move around. I thought that was just really incredible how each one of those were meticulously drawn in.
Yeah, and something else that they were really good at was making stuff that was gross look real gross. There was a scene where Tetsuo gets, I guess, haunted or tricked by these kids, and he steps on a glass, and you feel it. It feels like someone actually steps on a glass.
Oh, jeez, it's not good.
But cycling back to what you talked about earlier, how this was really a bridge in Japanese pop culture to American pop culture. To an annoying extent, you see anime is a very popular thing amongst younger kids these days. From people in their 20s to, I would say, and younger, they really love anime because it's become a much bigger thing here in America. You have people like Toonami to thank for that, or Funimation, who also now have the rights to the localization of Akira. But there was really nothing like that in 1988.
Oh yeah.
And Akira was the big one. And I don't think it really gets talked about enough as just that. When people think of like, oh, what was the first anime to, come to America, they think of like, Dragon Ball Z.
Or the Studio Ghibli film.
Or Studio Ghibli, yeah. But they don't really talk about Akira. Akira's sort of been lost to time in that sense. But, a lot of the big stories of people in the animation industry was like, I was a kid, and there were kids on my neighborhood who were passing around a VHS of Akira from house to house so that everyone could watch it. And that's when I knew I wanted to be an animator, And it's really heartwarming to know that, this was it. This was what brought anime to America, which is this huge staple in pop culture. Because you have, My Hero Academia is a current running anime. It was the second most watched show in the world during the pandemic.
It's actually pretty impressive.
Yeah, beaten only by SpongeBob SquarePants.
Of course,
but
yeah. Can't beat SpongeBob.
Nothing but SpongeBob was watched more than My Hero Academia. So anime has this huge power in America, and I think that a lot of that is because of Akira. It had this sort of mysticism. It had this thing that you wouldn't really see in animated movies. Because 1988, that would have been a lot of Disney stuff like The Little Mermaid. Stuff like that.
Which this is very different to The Little Mermaid, not
Very
just
different.
plot-wise, but also through animation. It's night and day when you look at the two side by side.
Yeah, and I'm not saying one's better than the other. I love The Little Mermaid. Hey, under the sea.
Oh, Jesus.
But yeah, I think both are really great, and I think it was really a great step forward for also adult animation.
Oh, very much so.
A lot of people don't look at animation as this adult thing, unless it's like Sausage Party or The Simpsons. Where
Well,
it's
yeah, and Akira is rated R, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you've got stuff like that where it's just the whole joke is hot dog says swear word. Yeah, but then you got stuff like the reboot of Samurai Jack, which definitely clearly took a lot of inspiration from this. Took a lot of what made this great and brought it over to there to make animation something that is not adult in the sense of humor, but in the sense of it is mature themes that are being dealt with. And I think Akira really did bring that forwards. Did you have anything you wanted to say about its influence? How do you feel?
Yeah, no, I definitely see its influence in the United States. I mean, just the huge impact just the huge anime following that people have gotten. I mean, I can remember, I'm sure everybody can remember their high school. There would always be those group of anime kids just walking around with their like Attack on Titan jackets and their weird stuff. And but no, I mean,
for better or for worse.
For better or for worse,
they wouldn't have that personality.
They wouldn't have that personality without Akira. And honestly, I think they do play into a lot of the great themes.
Yeah, you've got a lot of amazing classics in anime. You've got like Cowboy Bebop, Neon Genesis Evangelion, Yu Yu Hakusho. But I would say those are like the granddaddy of anime, and Akira's the great granddaddy of anime.
Oh, yeah.
Like they're the Abraham Lincoln, and Akira's the George Washington.
And it's really kind of turned into a cult classic among the community. I mean, if have you seen Akira? Well, haven't you seen Akira? I mean, it's really a starting point for most of these people, you know, who are really trying to get into the more cultural side of it.
Yeah, I'm really happy about that too, because like I was saying, Akira sort of got lost. You know, people sort of started to stop talking about it.
It's kind of had sort of a resurgence in the last couple of decades.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. It's definitely come back to become a bit more of a cult classic. All right, so we're going to do a rating from 1 to 5.
Oh, boy.
For the plot, I definitely give it a 3. I'd give it a 3 because it's a good plot, but it's hard to follow on your first couple viewings.
I'd give it that too. I personally would also give it a 3 for that reason, and for the other reason that there are just a lot of plots going on at the same time.
Yeah.
There's so many different groups of people trying to, you know, take control of the city, or, you know, try to get rid of the oppression of, you know, there's just so many different groups.
And then for artistic style, obviously, don't even have to discuss it. 5.
Oh yeah, easily.
5.
Easily a 5.
Cultural importance, once again, 5. And I don't think it's a very casual view. You know?
No.
I probably wouldn't put it on when some friends are over.
You gotta wanna watch it. It's, I would give it a 4, just because, like you said, it was kind of lost to time a little bit, outshined by some of its, you know, more recent movies that have come out. But it still has a very huge impact on, you know.
Yeah, it's had this huge impact.
Very much so. Yeah.
That's our time. Thank you so much for watching. We've been Making Concessions. I've been Griffin Presno.
I've been Mark Albers.
Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for some more amazing reviewers.